Hello and welcome to our webinar where we are going to be talking about navigating the challenges and benefits of social media in education. We're going to be talking about some of the potential pitfalls and things that we need to know about around like safeguarding, privacy, security, misinformation, and ways that we can actually really harness the benefits of social media as well. And to do that, we have got two expert guests. So we have got Dr. Rochelle Dene-Poth. And Rochelle has so many things under her umbrella. She is an EdTech consultant, an author, a teacher, a presenter, an attorney as well. And she's also won some presidential awards for her volunteer service and education. So amazing. Welcome, Rochelle.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. And then we've also got Matt Jessup, who is a head teacher of a small rural school in Northwest England. The school itself is award-winning in tech, which is very handy for us, as well as outdoor learning as well. So it'll be really exciting to have him on here as well to share his advice and expertise as well. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
It's really lovely to have you both on. So the first thing that we wanted to open up with was what creative ways teachers can use social platforms in the classroom. So Rochelle, would you mind starting?
No, and it's funny to have me talking about social media because for so many years I stayed away from social media. I didn't see the value in it. And I recall planning a high school reunion and trying to find people's information in the telephone book. And my friend said, do you really think you're going to find all these, like 600 people, and that they're still where they lived and their names have not changed or anything like that? And so that's when I got onto Facebook. And I wrote a series of blogs about like how I was so wrong about all of these different platforms and social media because I just didn't get it. I didn't see the educational value in it, but I've seen a lot of different really unique ways that teachers have in their classroom, have students create like TikTok videos. And in that process, they're helping students to understand, what is appropriate to post. They're being creative and they're learning different skill sets. So that's one thing that I've seen. And then also for like using like Instagram. I know a lot of teachers use Instagram and TikTok, but on Instagram, some of the creative things I've seen teachers do are they'll create a class hashtag, for example, and maybe the students are doing projects and they'll share that out with the teachers' learning network and show just examples of something that they've done, but they're highlighting it and they're sharing that with other educators. And I think that's like, it's such a great way, one, to value the students' work, and two, to show and give information to other educators that might be looking for ideas in those areas too. And that's when I saw the value in these different platforms for connecting educators globally, but also bringing in new opportunities for students. So those are just a couple of my quick off-the-cuff ideas there.
Yeah, I love that. And it's really interesting that you went from a journey of just not seeing the value in it at all to then actually coming through and going, oh, this could work for teachers and students. So what about you, Matt? What creative ways could teachers use social platforms in their classrooms?
I mean, we've, as a primary school, we're quite careful with what social media we use, and we've looked at various options in the past. We use a lot of it to showcase the children's work, share the work, and we've also used that as an opportunity to teach the children about online safety and cybersecurity in an increasing way now. It's been very useful as a head teacher of a small school in the middle of rural England. It's been very useful for us to establish connections and networks around the world, which has been quite beneficial for children and enhancing the cultural capital and just their awareness of the wider world and opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, I love that. And it's nice to hear it from a different angle as well. That, showcasing work is a really lovely way to use it and have that global reach as well. So we know that platforms are constantly changing. I mean, at the moment, we're seeing some shifts from things from like X to Blue Sky, etc. So platforms are always changing. So how can teachers choose the right ones to use? Matt, did you want to go first on that one?
Oh, I think we're starting with the school policy, and our school policy would always be informed by the privacy settings on whatever the social media is, what the content moderation is. Educational value's got to be front and centre of what we would use, and I would then come back to actually again showcasing the kids' work. Ease of use is definitely an aspect we have to consider, and the accessibility. And And then there's always the ongoing evaluation with safeguarding at the front of it, really, all of which informs the school policy. But yeah, probably not proactive enough in looking at new things out there, because we do just stick to Twitter and Facebook, and our Facebook social media is very much a closed account. And Twitter, we use hashtags on Twitter to share our work for different ages and different subjects, but I'm becoming, as you've sort of alluded to already, I'm becoming increasingly wary of Twitter, and we've come across a lot of bots following us on the school account recently, and we've had some abuse on our school account in the last year or so for things as well, which never happened when we first signed up and started using it. But yeah, school policy, constant evaluation is something that we're always looking at changing.
Yeah, you make a good point that sometimes actually what worked before might not be the case. It's good to keep continuing to evaluate as well.
Twitter's a very good example of that, I think. It's changing fast.
Absolutely. Rochelle, what would you add to that?
Yeah, well, everything that Matt said is exactly what I was thinking, because those are the essential things. And I think too, anytime you're making a choice about something, whether it's, I mean, now in the last year and a half, it's about AI. That's been the biggest thing. But in any technology, and even not even technology, even just a method that you're considering, it's always difficult to figure out which one to start with, because there's so many options that are out there. And so I always think, okay, what are you looking for and why? What's the purpose? How's it going to enhance learning? What are the benefits going to be for your students? But then all of the things that Matt said too, you have to especially consider things like the student privacy protection. Like, are we sure that our students are going to be safe interacting in these different spaces? And how do you guarantee that? And I don't know that there's actually 100% guarantee that student information and all that data is going to be secure, even if, and I had this question a couple of weeks ago from an educator who said, what if the site says, we don't share the data? And I said, like, the attorney brain goes, well, they're saying we don't share it, but do we know if they have any other integrations that have access to that information that they then share?
That they could share. Yeah.
Right. So I always say you have to make sure that whatever you choose, you're not going on a scavenger hunt when you go to the site. They should be, or the platform, whatever it is, that it's fully transparent, that you understand that they are in compliance, everything is there, easy to find, and you're not searching all over the place, because it's not something in many cases that's just specific to student use. You're also involving families, the educators, and everybody could have their information compromised. So it's not always an easy decision, but if you start with all the things that Matt said, and then continue to evaluate and make sure that, like, oh, well, it's in compliance and it's up to date, but then you don't check it for a year and you realize things have changed. So always being proactive too will definitely help.
Yeah. And is there a sort of certain time period you'd recommend for reevaluating these platforms as well, and going back and looking at them again?
Yeah, I think it depends on what they are. I mean, if you're looking at, large LMS platforms, like they're pretty like ongoing throughout the year. So that's, I would say, mid-year, end of year, and even just getting teacher, student, family, parent feedback too about the impact of the use of some of these different tools and platforms. But for things that are more, like nowadays, generative AI, those that are adding new features and things, they're changing a lot. And so we don't necessarily know, and I don't necessarily know what within the, the functionalities of it might change that could then alter their overarching, like, well, we don't share data, we don't store data, but then all of a sudden there's this new functionality that's actually in fact doing what it said it didn't do. So I think if it's something that's newer, then you want to make sure that you check on it more frequently, as opposed to something that has been used in your schools and is more long-standing, and is also upfront with like new changes and features and giving you the information, not that you have to always go and seek the information.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of continuing on from, obviously we talked about how teachers can choose these platforms. What about the training that teachers should be receiving as well? Because it's all well and good kind of them having policies in place, but what training should teachers get to effectively and safely integrate social media into their practice? Did you want to start with that one, Rochelle?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, that is a big area. Like some of the research I just finished in getting my doctorate was focused on the need for professional development specific to AI, but just in general, the training, and that's not just for teachers. I mean, that's everybody that's in the school community needs training, especially when we look at things like cybersecurity, and there's been an increase in a lot of cybersecurity attacks and ransomware and just, I don't even know, in the last couple of months, I've received either letters in the mail or emails, although you have to be careful whether or not they're real, that say that there was a data breach and that your information may or may not have been shared with somebody. So teachers should be trained in some things like, we need to model for our students like digital citizenship and how to use these different platforms, how to interact using social media, for example, know best practices for like creating strong passwords and securing their accounts and being able to identify when you've gotten an email that is like a phishing scam, for example. And then again, you bring in like the AI where you don't necessarily know if the image that you're looking at, the text that you're reading is real or not. And so there's a lot out there for teachers to have to really keep up with. But we're fortunate in that there are a lot of different ways to learn, like having conversation like we are now, blogs, podcasts, you name it. So using social media to actually help you to learn how to use it effectively, sometimes that's where you can find the answers too.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Matt? What would you suggest for training for teachers to help them effectively and safely integrate social media into their practice?
I think the training has to start with the safeguarding awareness, to be honest, because that impacts and informs everything we do using social media.
Of course.
We haven't mentioned parents and families yet, and I think certainly as a primary school, what permission the parents have given, and to a large extent what we teach the kids, we're very aware that the parents probably don't know as well. Kids have grown up with this technology. A lot of the adults haven't. I do think, I don't know if it's relevant or not, that the online safety that we teach in the UK is no longer sufficient. I think it's woefully inadequate, and I think we should be teaching cybersecurity. And as Michelle talks about phishing emails, we've been talking to companies about having them sent to us again. And my biggest worry there is that I'll be the first person to actually fall for the scam and click on it as their teacher. Ethics was mentioned by Rochelle, and I think that's quite important. Our school has been working with a company in Croatia for 3 or 4 years now. And they did a chatbot, and as part of the chatbot unit of work over the year, they did some work on ethics. So when AI became mainstream, if you like, or 18 months or so ago, our kids, when we introduced generative AI, straight away, they sort of understand the ethics behind it. They've given them a greater understanding of the bias. Hallucinations, there's been some eye-opening hallucinations that we've shared with the children. But it's all very relevant as part of this training for the staff as well, that it almost feels like going back to when we started using the internet, and actually everything we teach the kids now or teach the staff, it's like, look at the content, but look at the source, look at the creators, look at the authors, and consider more than one actual response from more than one source as well.
Yeah, no, I think those are really good points, and it's good, like you say, to mention that actually we're kind of learning alongside the students in some of these cases as things change and evolve, as are the parents as well. So, and kind of continuing on from that then, because obviously ethics and safeguarding was mentioned within there. How can schools educate students about digital citizenship? So things like how they can use social media ethically, think about the privacy, security, copyright. Rochelle, did you want to start with that? Because I know that you're very up on your ethics. I'm sure your attorney background probably feeds into that too.
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying. A couple of weeks ago, I had done a session on AI in the law and talking about just things within schools and the concern. And there's a lot to unpack there too that we don't necessarily even think about. And so that's another area of research. But
absolutely,
like I have an 8th grade class that I teach that's on STEAM, what's next in emerging technology. And I designed the class and I made it up because I put it in all these different topics I wanted to teach about, but one of them was digital citizenship, because the students come in and they're already on their phones and they're posting on all the different social media platforms, thinking that if they delete it, it's going to disappear, for example. And I thought, I need to teach them about this, because they use these phones and they've been using the phones and they're already online so much, but they don't necessarily, just because they have the device, know what is appropriate and inappropriate to put out there, like personally identifiable information, for example. And then, everything you see on the internet is true, right? Like that's not the case. And so fortunately, there are a lot of really great organizations out there that have materials for educators, for schools, for families, to gather information, that have lessons or activities and just games and things like that students can do on their own, or that the teachers in the classroom can lead an activity. And then, of course, modeling it for them, like showing how we post online, and the information that we share is also super important. And then even just in different classes too, you can do lessons or have students kind of explore how other countries, potentially how students of their same age use social media. What concerns do they have about it? Yeah, I've had students in my class and I'll ask them, who here has Instagram, who has Snapchat, and a lot of hands, but I do have students that they are not on it. They don't have a desire to use some of those, because they are very concerned about things like privacy, the information that's shared on there, if they interact with a friend or somebody, like where that information might end up. And so the more that you can provide, like even schools hosting an event for the community to come in and learn about it, because like, Matt said too, like families, I mean, it's not just the teachers and the students, there's a lot of other people that need to be part of this learning experience, especially when it comes to, the ethical use of some of the tools that are out there, and making sure that everybody is staying safe in those spaces.
Absolutely. Matt, would you add to that?
Yeah, I think it's of a sufficient importance now, whether talking about online safety or social media use, that it should be integrated across the curriculum, to be perfectly honest with you. Those that know me will know I have quite significant issues with the national curriculum in England, and the content of it, and the sheer volume of the content, and the lack of digital skills, digital literacy, cybersecurity that's actually taught as part of the mainstream national curriculum, is one of the main reasons I think it's woefully unfit for purpose, given what our kids, are growing up with now. And you see headlines in the UK in the papers that 1 in 3 children at the age of 3 have a smartphone, access to a smartphone. They obviously don't own the smartphone, but they have access to it. So they're growing up using this technology, and we are not educating them sufficiently. And our curriculum is actually a barrier to educating them, because the accountability alongside that. I'd add to that, the obviously age appropriate makes social media use very difficult for primary schools in this country, because most things are 13 or 16. But we've used various resources from places like the National College, which are simple PDFs that we can send to parents whose kids are playing Minecraft and other games, or using Snapchat.
And we know some of them are using it even when they shouldn't be at their age as well,
and so. I think the ship has sailed in terms of actual social media companies actually being trusted to regulate it, because if the parents are just giving devices to families, the social media companies can't. And I think it falls back on educators, that we've got to educate children about safety, cybersecurity, what's age appropriate, but alongside that, share the information with the parents as well. So you're becoming a role model, and the parents are becoming a role model. There's serious action needed, I think, and immediately, not in 5 years after a curriculum review. But as Rochelle says, there's lots of speakers and resources and role models out there that can be used. But curriculum integration, collaboration with parents, and parental awareness, I think, are key, certainly for the age of children we teach.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, we talked a lot about parents and the wider community. So looking at that wider community, what are some steps and considerations that we need to think about when we're using, say, social media to communicate with these communities, and also, I guess, how we can support them with understanding it as well, so they can, you know, continue to spread the message that schools are spreading to the pupils too. Rochelle, did you want to start on this one?
Sure. So so you said, looking at the wider community, like when a school has clear policies in place, like, and people know what those policies are, that's essential. And I know a lot of schools have active social media presence. You know, they're posting on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, just sharing things that are happening in the schools. So I think that for some, you know, for schools to have a policy that says, you know, somebody is posting for us and we're putting information out there so, you know, families can access it. And then also just within the classroom, the students should, I mean, students are not supposed to be on social media during the day, of course, but they are, because they don't use the network. They go and use their own data. But it's important that schools set up and have it also visible on their site. Like, what is their policy? If parents have questions about it, what to do if there's something that happens as a result of a communication that has occurred using social media. So if students have shared, you know, images or text or pictures or any of those different types of things, like you get into like cyberbullying, that of course is not something new, but just having a space where there's information that's up to date about anything that families need to be aware of when it comes to social media and the use of it in schools. And then also, I mean, there's benefits too. It's not all that it's negative, because that's how some schools communicate really quickly with families about things that are happening in the classroom. And so just constantly, you know, being, again, upfront with information, keeping it up to date and relevant and accessible, but also involving the community and families in giving feedback as well, so that then you can go back through and think through, do we need to change anything?
That's a really good point. So asking them about maybe some of the things that they'd like to see, or the information that would be useful for them as well.
Right.
Yeah. What about you, Matt? What would you add to that?
I would agree with everything that Rochelle's just said. I think communication of guidelines and rules is key. Permissions, again, comes into it for the ages of the children, if we're sharing images or work. I think a strategy is quite important to have. You've got to have a justification for doing it. And certainly we get families saying, we don't want our children to go on the internet. Why are you doing it? And it's about creating children that are aware of the importance of these connections. Communication guidelines and have to include awareness of data protection and GDPR. I've come across some companies recently who were using artificial intelligence and say to be GDPR compliant, but it's not hosted. The data is not hosted in the UK or the EU. So straight away, that's a big red flag to me. But I think there will be a lot of educators that wouldn't think to check that, if I'm brutally honest, because the education has not been given them.
So the next question was, how can schools monitor and manage the possible reputation risks associated with social media use by students and staff? Matt, did you want to start on that one?
Yeah, sure. With difficulty, I would say, especially primary school. And I think it would be a barrier to a lot of schools. I've come across schools who, for right or wrong reasons, usually wrong reasons, have ceased to use social media, which is usually Twitter in my experience, sometimes Facebook, but that's less so because you can have your private groups and things. You've got to have the clear product year policies, but the conduct in and out of school hours or the establishment hours has got to be quite clear in those policies, I think. I think digital literacy education, and again, I would include parents for this, has got to be key. It's got to be embedded across the curriculum. I would say the parents, from what I would know, are probably the bigger concern to me. And the children, and that they may overshare something, often for the right reasons. They're proud of little so-and-so and they want to share it elsewhere. Clear reporting mechanisms, and for any concerns or issues. And we have a crisis management plan which covers our social media. So if something does go badly wrong, we can contact the local authority representative and the cybersecurity centre and whatnot. And those sort of things, as somebody who's never had to do it, having the awareness of where it is and that there's people there to help is quite key.
Yeah, well, I hope you never have to, but it's
no,
always
I hope not
important to have that in place. For sure. What about you, Rochelle? What would you add to that?
Well, I just have to say that I really like that Matt said it was with difficulty or difficult, because
Yeah.
it is. I mean, there are so many different spaces out there, and I mean, when it comes to adults and students, anybody, I mean, we are so fast to interact on our phones, and it's hard. It really is difficult to monitor that, but because things are posted online, if you are a school district and you have your own page and people comment, like, you really need to have somebody who is monitoring it. People, whether, I mean, that's educators, people in administration, or somebody that specifically is the person that is posting and monitoring it. And, you know, different things, different platforms can track, you know, different types of speech and can knock that out or hide all of that. I mean, you can set up a lot of things depending on what it is, but everything that Matt said also, I mean, it always comes down to having clear guidelines and information and communicating and collaborating, like all of those words. That is how you can make sure that people are using these tools and these platforms in ways that they should be, that the things that are being used in safe, ethical, and responsible ways, and that they're safe for students and families and everybody else. But it takes time. Like, you definitely need a lot of time to go through it and evaluate what is being shared out there. And also just starting from the beginning, you know, start of a new school year. And then even going back to when we talked a little earlier about, like, how do you prepare teachers or training or things like that, aside from having a policy, being sure that people understand what that policy is. So having a meeting that says, hey, you know, this is an appropriate way to post. And teachers can do that in their classrooms. It doesn't even need to involve, I know with like younger students that Matt works with, just even using like Post-it notes in practice, like, what would it be like to post on Twitter or X? And then is that appropriate or not? And get them used to it. But there's a lot of parts into it. But I think looking at the ways to use it for good, but also having plans in place for when it has not been used for good, and there are problems that are arising from it. So, yeah.
I like what you said as well. Oh, sorry, Matt, go on.
I was just going to add that there's this, I think the context of my school is a small rural school with not many staff, and there's much bigger schools with greater number of staff with different pressures about that, and different financing for different establishments. There's people out there that can do it for you, and there's schools where they have people they employ to do it for them. But yeah, as Rochelle says, time to do it and check it and make sure you've not shared a photograph of somebody you haven't got permission for is often an additional challenge. And I think that's another barrier to schools not using it, because they just don't have that time.
Absolutely.
It's chaotic in England, and you know, the pressures. So extra time to check photos is not there.
And the time to monitor the responses and things as well, like we mentioned too. So I was just going to say, I liked what you said, Rochelle, about making sure people actually understand the policies, because I think sometimes schools are quite good at saying these are our policies and then sending them to everyone, but not really having the time to sit down and go through them and explain what each point means and make sure everyone understands.
Yeah. And that's, again, it comes down to time to do that.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Time. Got to make time for all these things that we don't have time for.
I know.
So coming back to actually earlier in the discussion, I think you both kind of mentioned how there's a possible, you know, global reach within social media. And obviously, Matt, you said you're in, you know, a small rural school, so it's quite nice to be able to really have that insight into like a different culture and different things around the world. So we know social media is quite global. So how can schools kind of maximize on that, those global learning opportunities? Did you want to go first, Matt?
I sure can do. I mean, I think, connections worldwide is a huge potential for learning opportunities, and you can make those through social media. There's various organizations that can support you to make them through social media. If you are a small rural school like ours, or even if you're a large urban school, I think that some of those are absolutely invaluable. I'm a huge fan and believer of the value of school trips and educational visits. But realistically, I'm never going to be able to take my children at our school to the Amazon rainforest and then the pyramids next term and then so and so. So I think social media can be used to actually enrich learning, enhance learning. whether it's speaking to somebody in there. There's languages and cultural exchanges you can do. I think collaboration with schools. But I mean, yeah, they're saying that schools in Uruguay are desperate to link with English-speaking schools, but they can't get anybody. And we agreed it's the time challenges, but actually, so we'll do it. I'm not remotely worried about meeting accountability measures in the UK. So, because for my kids to actually have pen pals, as I would have seen it as a child, digitally, was invaluable. You know, Uruguay as well. It's it opens up a whole new world of learning. South America, we can link it to so much other stuff as well. But yeah, guest speakers, virtual field trips. I think there's a huge wealth of opportunities out there for the national curriculum, for teaching, learning. It's just getting past those barriers and the worries that we've discussed attached to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, what would you suggest, Rochelle?
Yeah, so a couple of things that Matt brought up remind me of opportunities that I set up for my own students. That, you know, I teach Spanish and I teach the STEAM course, but taking my students to Argentina or to Spain, like right now, I can't do it. Like, it takes time to plan that, but using some different platforms, I was able to connect with a teacher and students in both of those places. And my students got to learn about things. I mean, I could have taught them about what family life is like or what common foods are, but they were able to leverage these different spaces in a safe space that we were using at the time to build relationships and learn directly from these students. And I had students say, like, I've never had a learning experience like this, to be able to actually talk to somebody and have a conversation and learn about what life is like in Argentina, what it's like to be a teenager in a school in Spain, even though there was a time difference, but using the different platforms kind of helped with that.
Yeah.
And then the ways that depending on what you use, that you can share an image or a video. I mean, there's that aspect of it. And then on the teacher side, being able to connect and reach out around the world to bring in learning opportunities, ideas, guest speakers, like Matt said. A friend of mine, actually, who is a teacher in Ohio, and she teaches second graders, has her students do this activity where they basically, like, she sets up 30 minutes and she gets a teacher or somebody from every state and a couple of different countries. And then her students have to, and they go through Zoom, students have to go through and they ask questions and they try to narrow down to figure out where the person is from. And the way that my friend is actually able to get these people to do this is she posts a message on Twitter, and then people see the message and they're like, I'm from North Dakota, or I'm from Australia, or whatever it may be. And then those kids get that amazing opportunity to talk to somebody from somewhere else and learn about these different places, and also see the value that you can gain from using social media platforms like that in a way that is, you know, purposeful and that's enhancing learning. So there's a lot of potential, but I think is the collaboration, because being in education can be isolating. You don't often get a chance to even talk to the teacher that's next door to you, but yet if you're in your classroom grading something or whatever, you can quickly post a message in a LinkedIn community, on wherever you want, and have somebody respond to you. And I think that's what was the game changer for me, is when I saw that I could build those connections and build my network and the impact that it had on me, myself, but also that I could bring in for my students.
Yeah, and if you're the only, you know, English teacher in your school, or you're the only teacher in a certain year group or whatever, that can be quite isolating as well. So it's nice to be able to just connect with other teachers in those same situations, even if they're in different schools.
Yeah, definitely.
Or locations. Yeah, brilliant. So the last thing really is just to wrap up, what single key piece of advice would you give to teachers for using social media platforms in their classroom? So just a nice little summary to finish off. Rochelle, did you want to go first?
When you said just like one single, I laughed,
okay, well,
because I can't ever just pick one, or I find a workaround or to like make it seem like it's one, but it's
just
not.
A little sort of snapshot.
Yeah, no, I think whatever works, it's going to be different for everybody. And you just want to find something that, I mean, assuming that whatever you're using is safe and all of that, but find a way to use it for your own growth as a professional and just to make personal connections, but then also to bring in opportunities for students. And it might be that you go on Instagram and you find there's like a lot there. I have a lot of friends that make reels and they teach elementary school, high school, and they're hilarious, but they're things that are relatable. And sometimes educators just like, you need a good laugh at the end of the day or something, or you need to be like, oh my gosh, like it's not just in my classroom that happens. And that might be the space for you. Or maybe it's on Twitter or X and you like the conversation, just find what is something that you're seeking maybe to learn, or ask your colleagues, like, what do you suggest? And try it. Try one of them. If you're not using anything, try one thing for a little bit. If you're like, I'm not sure about this, there's plenty other ones out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all really good advice. What about you, Matt?
I'm a firm believer of giving things a go. And I think it is a challenge for teachers. Michelle says, often you don't see the teachers in the classroom next to you over the course of the day.
Yeah.
And it gets to 6 o'clock and you're going home and they've already gone, or vice versa. That's not a reason to not try it. I think some of the enrichment you can get from using social media or using technology is absolutely invaluable. And I've seen, just when you were talking before, I was thinking about a project we did with a school in Norway. And the kids interacted with individual students in Norway and other schools in the UK. And I remember watching a child who was neurodiverse, but the patience he exhibited for the duration of that week and what he got from it and speaking to other children and guiding them was amazing. I know fully qualified teachers that couldn't do that. And I think that was sort of an evidence to me that, have a go at these things, cover your back, make sure it's safe, make sure it's secure, communicate why you're doing it. But it takes a lot of extra effort, but often it's really worth it.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you both so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I think everyone will have learned a lot from this session. So it's brilliant.
Thanks for joining today's webinar. I'm Maggie with NetSupport, and I want to share with you quickly how you can use Classroom Cloud to help support your social media initiatives in your classroom. Whether you're wanting students to be able to have access to social media sites to use them for school purposes, or you just want to have a better handle on what your students are doing while they're online, Classroom Cloud is the best option for you. You can see exactly what students are doing on their screens, and if they seem to be getting a bit off course or struggling with how to use the technology properly, you can go ahead and initiate a chat with one of your students, helping them to work through the material or to understand what is or isn't correct online while they're working to become better digital citizens. Interested in a bit more guidance in your classroom? While your school may filter out websites but allow others, you can decide what is or isn't appropriate for your lesson at any given point in time. So if our students are utilizing a tool that we don't want them to use, we can simply right-click on that and add it to our restricted websites. And by selecting the restricted website options, it'll kick them off of those websites and only allow them to ones that you've permitted for your classrooms. You maintain complete control and can guide students how you need them and when you need them to go to websites, while still allowing them the freedom to explore and to utilize different resources to help them with their education. You can check this out at classroom.cloud or visit netsupportsoftware.com to learn more about the tools we provide for education.